My name is Alaska Matthews, and I just turned 28 last month. Working as a marketing specialist at Apex Systems was my dream job until Marcus arrived. The excitement of landing this position quickly faded when my new manager started showing his true colors. That infamous email with, "I don't care who you are," changed everything. One message was all it took to expose years of toxic behavior. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how one email transformed an entire company culture. The job hunt after graduating with my marketing degree was brutal. I spent 6 months sending out applications, perfecting my portfolio, and questioning my career choice. When Apex Systems called me for an interview, I nearly screamed. They were the tech company everyone wanted to work for. Innovative products, gorgeous downtown office, and benefits that made my student loan debt seem less terrifying. The interview process was intense, 4 rounds over 3 weeks. First, a phone screening with Human Resources where Deborah, the HR coordinator, asked about my background and experience. She sounded impressed by my internship at a local advertising agency where I had helped launch a campaign that increased client sales by 22%. Next came a video interview with 2 team members who peppered me with questions about digital marketing strategies and analytics. The third round was a skills assessment where I had to create a mock campaign for one of their products. Finally, I met with the department heads for an in-person panel interview. When my phone rang with that offer, I danced around my tiny apartment. The starting salary was $60,000, $10,000 more than I expected. Plus, there was a signing bonus. I called my parents immediately, and they were thrilled, Mom cried. Dad said he was proud. It felt like all those late nights studying had finally paid off. My first day at Apex was like walking into the future. The office occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline. The receptionist, a friendly woman named Barbara, gave me a company badge and showed me to my desk, an actual desk, not a cubicle, with a brand new computer and ergonomic chair. Throughout the morning, coworkers stopped by to introduce themselves. Jessica Adams, a content strategist with bright red hair and a warm smile, offered to show me the best coffee spots nearby. Ryan Thompson, a graphic designer with sleeve tattoos and impeccable fashion sense, complimented my portfolio work he had seen during the hiring process. Samantha Wilson, the analytics specialist, promised to help me navigate the company data systems. Then I met Marcus Smith, the marketing director. Tall, with perfectly styled hair and a tailored suit, he exuded confidence. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Welcome aboard, Alaska," he said. "I reviewed your final project. Good instincts. We will refine those skills and make you a powerhouse." His words made me stand a little taller. The marketing director had personally reviewed my work and thought I had potential. The team took me to lunch at an upscale restaurant nearby. Marcus ordered expensive wine and appetizers for everyone. He shared stories about successful campaigns and big clients, occasionally asking about my background and education. When I mentioned my thesis on ethical marketing practices, he nodded approvingly. "We need fresh perspectives like that," he said. "Too many companies get comfortable with outdated strategies." Back at the office, I was assigned my first project, developing marketing materials for a new software product launch. Marcus gave me access to the product details and previous campaign files for reference. When I asked questions, he answered thoroughly and encouraged me to bring my ideas to our next team meeting. Jessica and I clicked immediately. During our coffee breaks, she filled me in on office dynamics and shared tips for navigating company politics. She had been at Apex for 3 years and loved the creative freedom. When I mentioned how helpful Marcus had been, she smiled and agreed that he was knowledgeable. That first month flew by. I stayed late most evenings, wanting to prove myself worthy of the opportunity. When I presented my initial campaign concepts, Marcus praised my approach in front of the entire team. He particularly liked my idea to target small business owners through specialized content marketing rather than just focusing on corporate clients. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need," he said during the meeting. "Alaska has identified a market segment we have been overlooking." At the end of the month, Marcus called me into his office for my first performance review. He said he was impressed with my dedication and creativity. The team had already implemented several of my suggestions, and early metrics showed positive results. As I left his office, he handed me an envelope containing a $500 performance bonus. I called my parents that night, telling them how perfect everything was. Dad joked that I should not get too comfortable, Nothing stays perfect forever. I laughed off his warning. What could possibly go wrong in such an amazing workplace? The shift in Marcus's attitude was subtle at first. It happened after a company-wide meeting where I had answered a question from the CEO about our new campaign targeting small businesses. The CEO had seemed impressed with my response, even mentioning it again at the end of the meeting. I noticed Marcus watching me with an unreadable expression. The next day, during our team meeting, Marcus interrupted my presentation on social media metrics. "These numbers are misleading," he said sharply. "You are not accounting for seasonal fluctuations. This is basic marketing knowledge." Heat rushed to my face as everyone turned to look at me. I tried to explain that I had factored in seasonality on the next slide, but Marcus had already moved on, dismissing my work with a wave of his hand. After the meeting, Jessica pulled me aside. "Do not take it personally," she whispered. "Marcus can be territorial, especially with female team members who get attention from upper management." When I asked what she meant, Jessica glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "There was a woman named Rachel who worked here before you. Super talented clients loved her. After she presented a successful campaign to the board, Marcus started micromanaging everything she did. Made her rewrite reports multiple times, excluded her from client meetings, criticized her in front of the team. She quit after 6 months." I felt a chill, despite the warm office. "Is that why the position was open?" Jessica nodded. "Just be careful, document everything." That same week, I noticed another concerning incident. I had drafted an email summary of our quarterly results for the executive team, which Marcus had asked me to prepare. When the email went out, I saw he had removed my name completely and sent it as if the analysis was entirely his work. When I mentioned this to him, casually asking if I should be copied on such communications, he dismissed my concern. "The executives do not need to be bothered with the details of who did what," he said coolly. "Everything from our department comes through me. That is how the hierarchy works." I tried to accept this explanation, but it felt wrong. Later, I discovered that other team members were often credited by name in similar communications. The workload distribution began changing too. Marcus started assigning me projects with unreasonable deadlines, often waiting until Friday afternoon to request complex analyses for Monday morning meetings. When I stayed late to complete these assignments, he would email at 9 or 10 at night with additional requirements claiming they were critical and just came up. During a particularly stressful project, I made a minor error in a spreadsheet formula. Marcus discovered it during a team review and spent 10 minutes detailing my mistake, calling it careless and unprofessional. Meanwhile, when Brad, a male colleague, made a similar error the following week, Marcus simply noted it needed correction and moved on. Samantha, who had been at the company for 2 years, confirmed my growing suspicions over lunch one day. "Marcus has a pattern," she said quietly. "He loves new female hires at first, gives them challenging projects and praise. Then, if they start to shine too brightly, he systematically undermines them. It happened to me too, until I learned to downplay my achievements around him. I began keeping detailed records of every interaction, saving emails, documenting assignments and deadlines, noting how similar tasks were distributed among team members. The discrepancies were becoming impossible to ignore. When I approached human resources about the situation, Deborah listened sympathetically but offered little concrete help. "Have you tried speaking directly with Marcus about your concerns?" she asked. "Management styles differ, and what feels like targeting might just be his way of pushing high performers." Her response felt rehearsed, as though she had given it many times before. When I pressed about the pattern other female employees had experienced, she became evasive. "We take all concerns seriously, but without specific policy violations, there is not much HR can do officially. Perhaps consider whether this team is the right fit for your working style." Walking back to my desk, I felt my stomach knot. 6 months into my dream job, I was beginning to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. The work itself was still exciting, the company's products innovative, but the daily dread of Marcus's criticism and manipulation was taking a toll. That night, I called my parents, and for the first time admitted things were not perfect at Apex. Mom suggested looking for another job, but the thought of starting over so soon felt like failure. Dad reminded me that sometimes the best education comes from difficult situations. "Just make sure you are learning the right lessons," he said. "And remember, your worth is not determined by how one person treats you." I fell asleep wondering how many other employees had faced the same dilemma, and how many had simply given up and left. By my 7th month at Apex, Marcus had escalated from subtle undermining to outright hostility. He began requiring me to submit daily progress reports that no other team member had to provide. Each morning, I would find emails with extensive critiques of my previous day's work, often focusing on minor details while ignoring the overall quality or results. The contrast in how Marcus treated male team members became impossible to ignore. During meetings, he would interrupt me mid-sentence but would listen attentively when Ryan or Brad spoke. He approved their requests for professional development opportunities, while denying mine for budgetary reasons. When they missed deadlines, it was understandable due to workload. When I needed an extension, it showed poor planning on my part. The exclusion began next. I arrived at work one morning to discover a client meeting had been moved up, and everyone on the team had been notified except me. When I mentioned the oversight to Marcus, he claimed it must have been an email glitch, and suggested I check my spam folder more diligently. Later, Jessica confirmed she had seen my name on the original meeting notification, but it had been removed in the update. The most humiliating incident came during a presentation to potential investors. I had spent weeks preparing comprehensive market analysis and creating compelling visuals. 5 minutes into my presentation, Marcus interrupted. "Let me clarify what Alaska is trying to say," he said, standing up and essentially taking over. He proceeded to present my data with slight modifications, occasionally glancing at me with a subtle smirk. The investors seemed confused by the interruption, but asked no questions. After the meeting, several colleagues avoided eye contact with me, clearly uncomfortable with what they had witnessed. That same afternoon, I overheard Marcus speaking to another department head in the break room. "The newer marketing staff lack fundamental understanding of our industry," he said, "particularly Alaska. Great personality, but the technical skills just are not there. I am having to redo most of her work." I froze, coffee cup in hand, as the blatant lie hung in the air. The other manager nodded sympathetically, unaware that the reports Marcus had recently praised to the executive team were entirely my work, unchanged, save for his name in the byline. When a position opened in the digital marketing team under a different manager, I immediately applied for a transfer. 3 days later, HR informed me that internal transfers required manager approval, and Marcus had declined to sign off, citing essential personnel needs in his department. The constant stress began affecting every aspect of my life. I lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks. Sleep became elusive, with work anxiety keeping me awake until the early morning hours. When I did sleep, I often had nightmares about being publicly humiliated in company meetings. Friends commented that I seemed withdrawn and on edge. Jessica became my lifeline during this period. She would text me encouraging messages throughout the day and occasionally leave supportive notes on my desk. Over dinner one evening, she confided that she had considered quitting multiple times because of Marcus, but stayed because she loved the work and her other colleagues. "He seems to target women who threaten him intellectually," she observed, "especially younger women with fresh ideas. There have been at least 5 since I joined." Through LinkedIn, I connected with Allison, who had left Apex the previous year. We met for coffee on a Saturday, and she immediately recognized my situation. "The isolation, the criticism, the sabotage, classic Marcus," she said. I nearly had a breakdown before I resigned. The worst part, HR knew. Multiple complaints had been filed, but nothing changed. I began documenting everything meticulously in a password-protected file. Dates, times, verbatim quotes, witnesses, and how comparable situations were handled with other employees. I also saved every email, screenshot text messages, and recorded notes immediately after concerning interactions. For the first time, I seriously considered quitting, but with student loans and rent in an expensive city, I could not afford to be unemployed. Besides, some stubborn part of me resisted letting a bully win. I found some solace in an online support group for workplace harassment. Reading others' stories made me realize I was not alone or overly sensitive. Many members had faced similar situations with toxic managers, who specifically targeted certain employees while maintaining a professional facade to superiors. One evening, after a particularly demoralizing day, where Marcus had taken credit for my marketing strategy in an email to the CEO, I broke down crying in my apartment. Through tears, I called my mother, who listened quietly to my story. "Alaska," she said, "finally, you have 2 choices. Leave and find somewhere that values you, or stay and fight. But if you stay, You need to be prepared for things to get worse before they get better. Her words stayed with me as I fell into restless sleep, uncertain which path to take. The breaking point came with our biggest project of the year, a comprehensive rebrand for our flagship software product. I had spent 3 months researching market trends, conducting user interviews, and developing a strategy that would position us ahead of competitors. The presentation to the board was scheduled for the following week, and as the lead on the project, I had been preparing my slides and talking points. On Tuesday morning, Marcus called me into his office. He sat behind his desk, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I will be handling the board presentation for the rebrand, he announced without preamble. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. But I have been leading this project from the beginning. All the research, the strategy development, the creative direction, that was my work. Yes, and you have done adequate background preparation, he said dismissively. But this is too important for someone at your experience level. The board expects to hear from senior leadership. That is not fair, I protested, my voice rising slightly. I deserve to present my own work. Previous project leads have always presented to the board. Marcus leaned forward, his expression hardening. This is not a democracy, Alaska. I make the decisions about who presents what. If you cannot accept that, perhaps you should reconsider whether Apex is the right fit for you. The right fit, I echoed, anger finally overcoming my usual caution. You have been undermining me for months, taking credit for my work, excluding me from meetings, assigning impossible deadlines. This project is mine, and I have earned the right to present it. Several colleagues glanced our way through the glass walls of Marcus's office, clearly able to sense, if not hear, our confrontation. You are being emotional and unprofessional, Marcus said coldly. This is exactly why junior staff do not handle board presentations. I will review your materials and incorporate what is usable. Will you at least credit me as the project lead, I asked, already knowing the answer. Team efforts do not require individual credits, he replied. Now I suggest you get back to your desk and compose yourself. We will discuss this further if necessary, but my decision is final. I left his office shaking with rage and humiliation. Jessica found me in the restroom 10 minutes later, trying to regain my composure. He is taking the rebrand presentation, I told her, wiping angry tears. 3 months of my life, and he will present it as if it was all his idea. Jessica squeezed my shoulder. This is what he does. He waits until you have done all the hard work, then swoops in at the moment of recognition. He said he will incorporate what is usable from my materials, I said bitterly. You know what that means. Everything with his name on it, she nodded. I am so sorry, Alaska. Through the rest of the week, I went through the motions, updating the presentation materials as requested, while watching Marcus schedule preparation meetings with the executives, meetings I was conspicuously not invited to attend. On Saturday night, after hours of internal debate, I made my move. I drafted a careful email to Marcus, copying Brad, our department's director. Marcus, regarding the upcoming board presentation for the product rebrand, I would like to formally request the opportunity to present the sections I developed, specifically the market analysis, user research findings, and strategic recommendations. As the team member who has led this project for the past 3 months, I believe this arrangement would provide the board with the most accurate and insightful presentation of our work. I am happy to meet Monday morning to discuss how we might structure the presentation to highlight both the strategic vision and leadership aspects. Thank you for your consideration, Alaska Matthews. I read it over a dozen times before finally hitting send, my heart pounding. Part of me hoped Marcus would not check his email until Monday, giving me time to prepare for the fallout. That hope was shattered when my phone pinged with an email notification at 11:30 Sunday night. The subject line read simply, RE, Board Presentation. With trembling fingers, I opened the message. Alaska. I find your continued insubordination and entitlement deeply troubling. Let me be absolutely clear. I am the director of marketing. I decide who presents what to the board. Your role is to provide support materials as directed, not to challenge my authority or make demands. I don't care who you are or what you think you deserve. This is not a collaborative decision. Your attempt to involve Brad in this matter demonstrates poor judgment and a concerning lack of understanding about professional hierarchies. Consider this your final warning. Any further attempts to undermine my authority will result in formal disciplinary action. If you cannot accept your role in this organization, Perhaps it is time to explore opportunities elsewhere. The presentation proceeds as I have directed. Marcus Smith, Director of Marketing, Apex Systems. I stared at my screen, shock, giving way to a strange sense of clarity. The mask had finally slipped completely. Here in black and white was evidence of what I had endured for months: the bullying, the power trips, the intimidation. With hands still shaking but mind suddenly resolute, I picked up my phone and called Jessica. He responded, I said, when she answered, my voice calmer than I expected. And it is bad. Really bad. What did he say? She asked, concern evident in her voice. I read her the email verbatim, including the capitalized threat. Oh my God, Jessica breathed. Alaska, this is beyond toxic. This is workplace harassment documented in writing. What should I do? I asked, though a plan was already forming in my mind. Forward it to HR first thing tomorrow, she suggested, then hesitated. But honestly, based on how they have handled things before, it will disappear into the void, I finished her thought. Or worse, they will see it as me being difficult. After a pause, Jessica said quietly, what about legal? Every email sent on company servers is property of Apex. Forward it to Gregory Thompson in legal. I worked with him on a contract issue last year. He is straightforward and takes company policy violations seriously. The suggestion sent a jolt of both fear and hope through me. Going to legal felt like crossing a Rubicon. There would be no going back. I could lose my job, I whispered. You are already losing it, Jessica pointed out. Marcus is making sure of that. At least this way there is a chance something might actually change. After we hung up, I sat in the dark of my apartment for nearly an hour weighing my options. Finally, I opened my laptop, created a new email, and forwarded the entire exchange, my original request and Marcus's threatening response, to Gregory Thompson, with the subject line, Urgent Workplace Harassment. Documentation. I added only a brief note, Mr. Thompson, I believe the attached email exchange requires immediate review by the legal department. I am available to discuss this matter at your earliest convenience. After sending it, I barely slept, my mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. Being fired, being blacklisted in the industry, facing retaliation from Marcus. By morning, I had almost convinced myself to call in sick, unable to face the consequences of my decision. Then my phone chimed with a new email notification. The sender, Gregory Thompson. Miss Matthews, thank you for bringing this matter to my attention. Please come to my office at 9:00 a.m. before the start of regular business. We take these matters very seriously. I arrived at the office 30 minutes early, hoping to avoid running into Marcus before meeting with Gregory. The legal department occupied half of the 32nd floor, with Gregory's office situated in the corner with views of both the river and downtown skyline. His assistant, an older woman named Marilyn, greeted me with a professional smile and immediately escorted me inside. Gregory Thompson was a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and rectangular glasses. He rose from behind his desk and extended his hand. Miss Matthews, thank you for coming early, he said, his tone serious, but not unfriendly. Thank you for seeing me, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I have reviewed the email exchange you forwarded, he said, getting straight to the point. Before we discuss next steps, I need to ask, is this part of an ongoing pattern of behavior? The directness of his question momentarily caught me off guard. For months I had been trying to make people see what was happening, and here finally was someone asking the right question. Yes, I said firmly. For approximately 5 months, I have documentation of multiple incidents. Gregory nodded, making a note on a legal pad. Would you be willing to provide that documentation? And are there others who have experienced similar treatment? Yes, to both questions, I answered. At least 3 current employees and several former staff members. He looked up sharply at this. Former employees left because of this behavior? According to what they have told me, yes. Gregory's expression remained neutral, but I noticed his jaw tighten slightly. He pressed an intercom button on his desk. Marilyn, please contact Janet Keller in HR and Michael Foster, the CEO. Request their presence for an emergency meeting in Conference Room A at 10 a.m. Also, please ask Brad Johnson from Marketing to attend. Turning back to me, he explained, this situation requires immediate attention at the highest level. The language in that email alone constitutes a clear violation of our workplace conduct policies, but if there is indeed a pattern, as you suggest, the implications are more serious. My stomach nodded with anxiety. Will Marcus be there? Yes, Gregory confirmed. He needs to be given the opportunity to address these concerns directly. I understand this may be uncomfortable, but I assure you that this meeting will be conducted with appropriate professionalism. The next hour passed in a blur as I retrieved my documentation, and Gregory reviewed it carefully occasionally, asking clarifying questions. By the time we headed to Conference Room A, he had a comprehensive understanding of the situation and a thick folder of evidence. The conference room was Apex's most impressive meeting space, reserved for board meetings and important client presentations. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, while a massive mahogany table dominated the center of the room. When we entered, several people were already seated. Michael Foster, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, looking concerned. Janet Keller from HR and Brad Johnson from marketing sat on one side, while Marcus occupied a chair on the opposite side, his expression thunderous when he saw me enter with Gregory. "What is this about?" Marcus demanded immediately. "I have a board presentation to prepare for." Michael Foster raised a hand. "Marcus, please. Gregory has called this meeting to address a serious matter. We will give him the floor." I took a seat beside Gregory, avoiding eye contact with Marcus, whose glare I could feel burning into me. Gregory began without preamble. "I have called this meeting to address what appears to be an ongoing issue of workplace harassment and unprofessional conduct within the marketing department." Marcus scoffed audibly, but Gregory continued undeterred. "Yesterday evening, Miss Matthews forwarded me an email exchange that contains language and threats that clearly violate Apex's professional conduct policies. With permission, I would like to read this exchange aloud, to ensure everyone understands the severity of the situation." Michael nodded his consent, and Gregory proceeded to read my initial email, requesting to present my portion of the project to the board. His delivery was measured and neutral, allowing the words to speak for themselves. Then he moved on to Marcus's response. As he read the capitalized "I don't care who you are" and the thinly veiled threats, I saw Janet from HR wince. Brad stared at his hands while Michael's expression darkened progressively. When Gregory finished reading, he set the paper down deliberately and looked directly at Marcus. "Can someone explain to me how this type of communication is acceptable in our company?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus shifted in his chair, his initial anger giving way to defensive posturing. "That email is being taken completely out of context," he finally said. "Alaska has repeatedly challenged my authority as department head and attempted to circumvent the chain of command. My response, while perhaps strongly worded, was necessary to establish clear boundaries after multiple incidents." "Strongly worded," Gregory echoed. "Mr. Smith threatening an employee's job security for requesting to present their own work is not strongly worded, it is textbook intimidation." Marcus's face flushed. "She is exaggerating the situation. She is a junior employee who lacks perspective on how corporate presentations function. She has been difficult to manage from the beginning, constantly seeking recognition beyond her role." I started to respond, but Gregory gently touched my arm, indicating he would handle this. "Mr. Smith, we have evidence suggesting this is not an isolated incident, but rather part of a pattern of behavior specifically targeting certain employees." At that moment, the conference room door opened and Jessica walked in, followed by Samantha and another colleague named Diana from the digital team. I had not expected their arrival, and glanced questioningly at Gregory. I took the liberty of asking Miss Adams if she and others would be willing to provide context to our discussion, Gregory explained calmly. Marcus's face paled visibly. "This is absurd. You are orchestrating a witch hunt based on the complaints of an underperforming employee." Michael Foster spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "Marcus, I would like to hear what these team members have to say." Over the next 45 minutes, Jessica, Samantha, and Diana each shared their experiences working under Marcus. They described the pattern of initial praise followed by systematic, undermining the taking credit for others' work, the different standards applied to male versus female team members, and the intimidation tactics used to silence complaints. 4 talented marketers have left the company in the past 2 years specifically because of Marcus's management, Jessica concluded. Each of them told me directly that they could not continue working in such a toxic environment. The CEO looked stunned. Janet from HR appeared increasingly uncomfortable, while Brad sat with his arms crossed, a troubled expression on his face. When they finished, Marcus launched into a defensive tirade, claiming they were colluding against him out of professional jealousy. He pointed to department successes under his leadership and argued that his management style, while demanding, produced results. "This is clearly a coordinated attack," he insisted, voice rising. "Alaska was unhappy about not presenting to the board, so she engineered this ambush to undermine me. These women are friends who are supporting her narrative. Where are the men from my team? Why are not they here complaining?" "Because you do not treat them the same way," I said quietly, finding my voice at last. "Ryan gets deadline extensions without question. Brad's ideas are welcomed in meetings while mine are interrupted. Keith's mistakes are learning opportunities while mine are evidence of incompetence." I maintained steady eye contact with Michael Foster as I continued. "I came to Apex because I believed in the company's values and mission. I have given everything to my work here, often staying until 9 or 10 at night to meet the additional requirements Marcus would email me after hours. I have never missed a deadline despite being assigned workloads much heavier than my colleagues. And yet nothing I do is ever good enough, while male team members receive praise for lesser accomplishments." I slid my documentation folder across the table toward Michael and Janet. "Everything I am saying is documented here. Dates, times, specific incidents, differential treatment with witnesses noted. This is not about a board presentation. This is about months of systematic harassment that HR has repeatedly ignored when approached by female employees." Janet began to protest, but Michael raised his hand to silence her, his expression grave as he flipped through the pages of documentation. Marcus, seeing the CEO's reaction, changed tactics. "Michael, you know how valuable I have been to this company. These accusations are grossly exaggerated. If there have been misunderstandings, I am willing to work with HR to improve communication. But this ambush approach is unprofessional and damaging to team morale." Michael Foster closed the folder and looked around the table before his gaze settled on Marcus. "Marcus, I am deeply disturbed by what I have heard today. This goes against everything Apex stands for as a company. Pending a full investigation, I am placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately." The shock on Marcus's face was almost comical. Administrative leave, based on complaints without proper investigation. This is outrageous. "The investigation will begin today," Michael replied firmly. "Gregory will oversee it to ensure objectivity. Until it is complete, you will not return to the office or contact any team members." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair skidding backward. "You are making a massive mistake. I built that marketing department from nothing. Please collect your personal belongings and surrender your company access card to security within the hour." Michael continued calmly. "We will be in touch regarding next steps." As Marcus stormed out, the tension in the room remained palpable. Michael turned to me with a sincere expression. "Miss Matthews, on behalf of Apex, I want to apologize for what you and your colleagues have experienced. This should never have happened, and it represents a serious failure of our management and HR systems. I promise you that we will conduct a thorough investigation and take appropriate action." I nodded, feeling strangely numb despite the vindication. The adrenaline that had carried me through the meeting was beginning to ebb, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "The rebrand presentation to the board is tomorrow," Brad noted, breaking the awkward silence. "Alaska, given the circumstances, would you be willing to take the lead as originally planned? You know the material better than anyone." "I would be happy to," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. As the meeting concluded, Michael asked me to stay behind briefly. Once the others had left, he looked at me with genuine concern. "Are you all right?" This could not have been easy. "I am. Processing," I answered honestly. "It has been a difficult few months." He nodded solemnly. "What you did took real courage. Many people would have simply left. Thank you for forcing us to confront this issue. I promise you things will change." Walking back to my desk, I felt dozens of eyes on me. Word had clearly spread about the emergency meeting and Marcus's abrupt departure. Some colleagues avoided my gaze, while others offered small smiles of support. Jessica squeezed my shoulder as I passed her desk, a gesture of solidarity that meant more than words could express. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in months, I felt I could breathe again. The days following Marcus's removal were chaotic. Rumors swirled through the office like wildfire. Some colleagues believed Marcus had been fired for embezzlement. Others thought he had been caught sharing confidential information with competitors. The truth, while known to those directly involved, remained officially classified as an internal personnel matter during the investigation. The marketing department existed in a strange limbo. Brad stepped in as interim director, calling an all-hands meeting to assure everyone that projects would continue as planned. He announced that I would be presenting the rebrand strategy to the board as originally intended, which drew mixed reactions, supportive nods from some, suspicious glances from others. Marcus had cultivated strong allies during his tenure, particularly among the male employees he had mentored and promoted. Keith cornered me in the break room that afternoon. "You know, some of us respected Marcus," he said coldly. "He pushed us to be better. Not everyone needs to be coddled." "This was not about being coddled," I replied, keeping my voice even. "It was about professional respect and equal treatment." "Sure," he scoffed. "Keep telling yourself that." Not everyone was antagonistic. Several colleagues I had barely interacted with stopped by my desk with coffee or encouraging notes. A designer named Marie confided that she had been considering quitting because of similar treatment from Marcus, but had been afraid to speak up. "Thank you for being brave enough to do what I could not," she whispered, before hurrying back to her desk. The board presentation went surprisingly well. Despite my nerves and the unusual circumstances, the directors were impressed with the research and strategy I presented. Several asked insightful questions that showed genuine engagement with the material. The CEO, true to his word, introduced me as the project lead and emphasized my central role in developing the rebrand strategy. Meanwhile, Gregory Thompson and his team conducted a thorough investigation. They interviewed every member of the marketing department individually, as well as employees from other departments who had worked closely with Marcus. Most significantly, they reached out to former employees who had left the company during Marcus's tenure. Jessica kept me updated on the investigation's progress. Gregory contacted Rachel Allison and 3 others who quit because of Marcus, she told me over lunch 2 weeks after the initial confrontation. Apparently, they all provided similar accounts of targeted harassment, especially toward women who showed leadership potential. The formal findings were presented to the executive team exactly 15 days after Marcus was placed on leave. The next morning, an email went out to all employees. Apex Systems is committed to maintaining a workplace environment that promotes dignity, respect, and equal opportunity for all employees. Following a comprehensive internal investigation, Marcus Smith is no longer employed by the company. Brad Johnson will continue as interim marketing director while we conduct a search for a permanent replacement. We thank you for your patience and professionalism during this transition period. The clinical language did little to capture the emotional impact of the situation, but the message was clear: Marcus was gone for good. That same day, Janet from HR and Michael Foster asked to meet with me privately. Janet looked uncomfortable while Michael appeared genuinely remorseful. "Alaska, first and foremost, I want to extend our sincere apologies for what you experienced," Michael began. The investigation revealed a pattern of behavior that went unchecked for far too long. That represents a failure at multiple levels of leadership, including my own. Janet nodded stiffly. "We have identified significant gaps in our HR processes, particularly in how we handle complaints and monitor department dynamics. We are implementing new systems effective immediately." Michael leaned forward. "We would like to offer you the position of project management lead within the marketing department. This is a new role that would report directly to the director, but have significant autonomy in overseeing key initiatives. Your handling of the rebrand project demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership we need." The offer caught me off guard. After months of fighting just to be recognized for my work, being offered a promotion felt almost surreal. I asked for time to consider it, which they readily granted. Over the following weeks, the company underwent significant changes. Michael announced mandatory training on workplace harassment and inclusive leadership for all managers. A new anonymous reporting system was established for employees to flag concerns without fear of retaliation. Most importantly, the company hired an outside consultant to conduct a comprehensive review of company culture and recommend structural changes. Jessica was promoted to marketing strategy director, effectively taking over many of Marcus's former responsibilities. She immediately instituted weekly one-on-one check-ins with each team member and created a more collaborative approval process for projects. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Two of Marcus's closest allies resigned within a month. Others grudgingly adapted to the new expectations around professional conduct and collaborative credit. Despite the positive institutional changes, I still faced personal challenges. Some colleagues viewed me with suspicion, as if I might report them for the slightest infraction. Others seemed to expect me to be a crusader for every workplace issue. The pressure of being the one who took down Marcus sometimes felt as heavy as the harassment had. One afternoon, I overheard two colleagues in the kitchenette discussing me. "She must have exaggerated what happened," one whispered. "No way they would fire a director otherwise." "Maybe she had something on him," the other suggested. "You know how these things work." I wanted to confront them to defend my actions, but ultimately chose to walk away. Their speculation said more about them than it did about me or what had happened. After careful consideration, I accepted the project management lead position. The role offered an opportunity to help reshape department processes while developing my leadership skills. In my first week, I established transparent project tracking systems and clear guidelines for crediting individual contributions. My relationship with upper management evolved as well. Michael began including me in strategic planning sessions, valuing my perspective as someone who had experienced the company culture from multiple angles. Gregory, from legal, occasionally sought my input on updating company policies around professional conduct. One of my first initiatives was creating a mentorship program pairing junior employees with senior staff outside their direct reporting line. This provided newer team members with guidance, while protecting them from potential power dynamics with their immediate supervisors. Another unexpected consequence emerged when industry publications picked up the story through anonymous sources. While names and specific details remained private, the business community buzzed about a major tech company that had taken decisive action against executive harassment. Several other companies in our sector suddenly announced their own cultural initiatives and leadership training programs. 3 months after Marcus's departure, I received an email from Rachel, the former employee Jessica had mentioned early on. She had heard through the grapevine about what had happened and wanted to connect. We met for coffee that weekend. "When I left Apex, I felt like a failure," she admitted. "I thought I was not tough enough, not good enough. It took months of therapy to recognize that the problem was never me. I almost left too," I confessed. "Many days I wished I had rather than fighting." She smiled sadly. "But if you had, Marcus would still be there doing the same thing to someone else. Sometimes staying to fight is the hardest choice, but the most important one." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that sometimes the most difficult paths lead to the most meaningful changes. 1 year after that fateful email, I sat in the same conference room where the confrontation with Marcus had taken place. Now, however, I was leading a meeting on our newest marketing campaign. As I looked around the table at my colleagues, some familiar and some new, I marveled at how much had changed in a relatively short time. Apex systems had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The toxic culture that had festered under Marcus's leadership had given way to something more collaborative and transparent. Project credits were shared openly. Feedback was constructive rather than demeaning. Meetings were forums for genuine discussion rather than power plays. Michael Foster had kept his promise that things would change. Beyond the mandatory training and new reporting systems, the company had fundamentally restructured how performance was evaluated and promotions were determined. Cross-departmental review panels now assessed major decisions, reducing the potential for individual managers to play favorites or target specific employees. My own healing journey had been neither quick nor linear. For months after the confrontation, I struggled with anxiety in professional settings. Every time I received feedback or criticism, no matter how constructive, my heart would race and my mind would spiral with worries that I was being targeted again. I flinched when managers raised their voices, even in excitement. Presenting to groups triggered panic attacks that I had to carefully manage. At the urging of Jessica and my parents, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in workplace trauma. Dr. Patricia helped me recognize that my reactions were normal responses to prolonged stress and harassment. She provided tools for managing anxiety and rebuilding professional confidence. Most importantly, she helped me separate Marcus's distorted assessments from my actual capabilities. "His voice is still in your head," she observed during one session. Every time you question your judgment or apologize unnecessarily, you are letting him continue to influence your professional identity. That insight marked a turning point. I began consciously identifying when I was reacting to Marcus's ghost rather than present reality. Gradually, the phantom voice faded, replaced by my own strengthened professional judgment. Relationships within the company evolved as well. Those who had been skeptical of my motives eventually saw that I was committed to building a better workplace for everyone, not just pursuing personal vendettas. Keith, who had been one of Marcus's strongest defenders, eventually approached me after I helped salvage one of his projects that was behind schedule. "I misjudged you," he admitted grudgingly. "Marcus always said you were difficult and attention-seeking, but you have been fair and helpful to everyone, even those of us who gave you a hard time." My friendship with Jessica deepened into an unshakable professional alliance. As marketing strategy director, she implemented systems that ensured multiple perspectives were considered in every campaign. We often joked that we were the checks and balances of the department, keeping each other honest and pushing for excellence without crossing into toxicity. The company's cultural transformation attracted positive attention from unexpected quarters. When a prominent tech magazine ran an article on improving workplace environments, they interviewed Michael about Apex's changes. Without revealing specific incidents, he spoke candidly about recognizing systemic problems and taking decisive action to address them. "Sometimes it takes an extraordinary act of courage from one person to reveal problems that many have normalized," he told the interviewer. "The true test of leadership is how you respond when someone shows you an uncomfortable truth about your organization." That interview led to speaking invitations for both Michael and me at industry conferences about healthy workplace cultures. Standing at a podium addressing a room full of HR professionals and executives about my experience was terrifying but empowering. I focused not on the trauma, but on the systemic lessons, the importance of accountability at all levels, the danger of normalizing toxic behavior from high performers, and the necessity of truly independent reporting channels. After one such conference, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "I am living exactly what you described," she confessed. "Hearing your story gives me hope that things can change, that I am not crazy for feeling this way." I connected her with resources and later heard she had successfully addressed similar issues in her organization. Each such interaction reinforced that the painful experience had ripple effects beyond my own workplace. Within Apex, we established a peer support network for employees facing difficult workplace situations. What began as informal coffee meetings evolved into a structured program with guidelines and resources. The company officially sanctioned the group, providing meeting space and occasional funding for outside speakers on workplace rights and mental health. The rebrand project that had been the catalyst for the confrontation launched successfully and exceeded sales projections by 25%. In a poetic twist of justice, the industry gave it an award for marketing excellence with my name listed as lead strategist. When I reflect on the entire experience now, I realize how easily things could have gone differently. If I had not documented every incident, if Jessica had not encouraged me to forward that email to legal, if Gregory had not taken immediate action, if Michael had not been willing to confront uncomfortable truths about his company, any broken link in that chain could have led to a very different outcome. The most profound lesson I learned was about the power of one deliberate action. One email forwarded to the right person at the right time catalyzed change that affected hundreds of people across the organization. Before that moment, I had felt powerless despite all the documentation I had gathered. I had almost accepted toxic behavior as an unfortunate reality of corporate life. What changed everything was not just having evidence, but finding the courage to put that evidence in front of someone who could take meaningful action. The act itself was simple. Forwarding an email took less than a minute, but the decision to do it required overcoming months of conditioned fear and self-doubt. I also learned that when facing injustice, you are rarely as alone as you feel. Once I took that first step, others found their voices too. Jessica, Samantha, Diana, and eventually even former employees joined in providing their accounts. What had seemed like isolated incidents revealed themselves as part of a systemic pattern that could only be addressed collectively. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered my own resilience. There were countless moments when leaving would have been easier than staying to fight. Each time I chose to document another incident, to push back against unfair treatment, to keep believing in my own worth despite constant undermining, I was building strength I did not know I possessed. Now, when new employees join our team, I make a point of telling them directly, your voice matters here. Your work will be credited appropriately. If you ever experience or witness behavior that contradicts these values, my door is always open. Have you ever faced a toxic situation where one single action changed everything? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes it helps to know we are not alone in these experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share with others who might need to hear that change is possible. And remember, you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect in every workplace. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage in your own.